"Are you from Bike Meals?" asked the kid behind the counter as Brandon came in under the sound of the bell. "That's me. You got the food ready?" Brandon asked. The kid behind the counter smiled as he set the bags down. Brandon had trouble with some of the food places ever since starting with Bike Meals, but Lewis's Subs was not one of them. Lewis was one of those special individuals who had come to Cashmere and immediately began trying to make the town a little bit better. Kind of like Brandon's boss, John. John had come from outside Cashmere, as most of them had, and he had a great idea for a service that brought food to people's houses. They would call their orders into the hub, an operator would call it into the restaurant after getting their mobile payment, and then they would dispatch one of their bike delivery guys to go pick it up and take it to them. "It kind of reminds me of this thing we had where I came from," John would say, while scratching his head. "And if I think really hard, sometimes I can kind of remember it. It's foggy, but I remember it involved bringing food to people's houses, so they didn't have to go out and get it. I really think the people of Cashmere would enjoy having something like that." Brandon didn't know what he was talking about, but it served his purpose and helped keep a roof over his head, so he was more than happy to help John with his new business. "Any plans this weekend?" the kid asked Brandon as he grabbed up the bags. "Why, yes," Brandon wanted to say to him. "I plan on getting the last of my funds together so I can summon the Whispering God from the depths of my dreams." What he actually said was, maybe just hang out at home with some friends. "Sounds like a pretty good weekend. Well, you enjoy yourself, man, and we'll see you next time." Brandon thanked him and brought the food to the bike out in front of the restaurant. John had been kind enough to give all of them bikes with large baskets on the front so they could transport the food they took to the people. Bike Meals was really just a Cashmere institution, so it wasn't as if they had to go very far. John liked the fact that he got exercise. He could pedal an upwards of 10 miles a day on a busy day, and it kept him in great shape. He also liked that it put him in contact with interesting people. People like Casey Flynn, Brandon reflected. Casey Flynn had been the catalyst for all of this. Brandon couldn't remember his childhood. Couldn't even remember what he'd been doing 5 years ago before he came here. But he was pretty sure he'd been having the dreams since before he got here. The dreams were always the same. He was standing in an empty field and listening to someone quietly whisper. He wasn't sure what they were whispering. He couldn't quite hear that, but their words fell from the sky like manna, and Brandon now understood that the words came from something much larger than his understanding. At first, he'd been afraid of the whispers. He had dreaded the nights he would have the dreams, something that was happening more frequently after he arrived in Cashmere, and it had made it hard to keep a steady job. The dreams would wake him up, feed his insomnia sometimes, and that made it difficult to function throughout the day. It was hard to fall asleep when you were on a bike, however, and so bike meals were a good fit. Brandon often rode so hard and so long that he was too tired to even really notice the dreams. But that had been past Brandon. Now, he knew better than to ignore the whispering one, and Casey had helped him make that discovery. Casey was an interesting individual. He delivered food to Casey every day, had begun to be asked for his deliveries personally, and that had led him to hang around and talk to the old guy a little. Casey was no spring chicken. He was old and bald and pushing 70, but he had a wealth of knowledge. He was on Social Security, and he seemed to split his pension between occult research, bike meals, and his bills. He had books that you probably couldn't check out at the local library, books in languages that Brandon couldn't read. And Casey knew what was in all of them. He had one of those keys of Solomon, the ones that talk about hierarchies of demons in hell, and he had shown Brandon a lot of things you couldn't find on Google. Their friendship had begun slowly. Casey liked to order food from Lewis's Subs, and he said that Brandon was one of the few delivery guys who got it to him without crushing the chips or mashing the bread. Brandon had given him his food and left at first, but before long he had noticed the books Casey read and had questions. Casey, for his part, was glad to have someone to talk with, and that was how Brandon had begun to tell him about his dreams. Casey looked ravenous as he listened to Brandon tell him about the dreams, and when he finished, the old man told him something he'd been waiting for, though he didn't know it. These dreams are not nightmares. You're being contacted by an elder god. Casey had absorbed the information like a sponge, and the more Brandon told him, the more Casey told him. Casey suggested he start a journal, something to write down what he heard from the whispering entity. And Brandon had said that he would give it a try. Dream journaling was hard. It was something you had to work at, but after a year, Brandon had gotten pretty good at it. After a year of listening to those hollow whispers, those spidery condemnations, Brandon began to understand some of what was being said. Well, not understand. Understanding would have brought knowledge. Brandon began to transpose the words, and even though the words meant nothing to him, they meant something to Casey. He is telling you what you must gather in order to make his transition into this world. It's rare to be given such an opportunity. You should feel honored and moved to help him. From then on, Brandon had been doing just that. Punctual as always, my boy, Casey said as Brandon pulled up with his lunch. Come, sit. Tell me what news you have from the Whispering One. Brandon took out his journal and handed it to Casey, along with his sub. I marked down some new things I heard. I believe I've deciphered nearly all of it. Casey read over the journal, nodding. You do impeccable work, my boy. Did you finish the translation from yesterday? Brandon asked. Casey made a sound as he bit into the roast beef and cheese, his favorite, and wiped mayo on the arm of his plastic chair before grabbing a sheet of paper off the end table. Brandon had to lurch forward to grab the ashtray he nearly upset. The paper in his hands dribbled with ash flakes as he brought it out, and when the table was set to rights, he took it from the old man. Just finished an hour ago. Let us hope that your Whispering One is fond of sub sandwiches. I don't know how I would get by without Lewis and his subs. Brandon looked over the list, his brow crinkling as his hands began to shake. These candles, are you sure? They aren't the same ones as last week. Ah, yes, Casey said, popping a finger into his mouth before moving to the next. That was a mistake on my part. The translation wasn't precisely what I thought it was. Sorry if that caused any problems. Brandon chewed his lips. The ritual called for 5 blood-red candles of bale tallow, 5 candles of sky blue tallow, 5 candles of meltron tallow, 5 candles of gemstone tallow. Brandon had the 5 red ones and the 5 blue ones. But the week before, the ritual had called for 5 mint tallow candles. Meltron, however, sounded expensive, and now Brandon had 5 useless green candles that had cost him nearly $30. There was also blessed chalk to buy, gravestone ash to scavenge. He would need 5 pounds of red brick clay, and Brandon squinted at the last of it before looking up at Casey. A complete hawk skeleton. Indeed, Casey said, crumbling up the paper from his sub and tossing it into the corner where a dozen others sat in various states of decomposition. Where am I supposed to get a complete hawk skeleton? Brandon asked. I have been led to believe, Casey said as he reached for the chips within the bag, that most hawks have a full skeleton inside them. The hawk is the least of your worries. Some of these candles will be dear, and gravestone ash is not something most people still have. The bill will not be cheap, young sir. Not cheap at all. Brandon nodded, folding the paper up and putting it into his pocket. Well, best get back to work then. See you tomorrow, Casey. And you, Brandon, do tell your master I say hello. Brandon was off, heading back to the center for another delivery. His whispering one could not arrive on his own, and each meal delivered got him one step closer to fruition. He would see the source of those whispers, though he prayed he wouldn't be as old as Casey by the time he saw the one who whispered so.
Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's show. If you think you might like a little more spooky in your life, then please feel free to click on one of the videos we have up here. Maybe look at one of the playlists if you're trying to get caught up. I know, there's so many videos on the channel. There's so many series that are going at the same time. Sometimes you just need a little refresher course, and I gotta say, I always enjoy the views. If you're not subscribed, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Maybe hit the bell so you don't miss anything. We upload a lot on this channel, so you won't want to miss a single story as they come out. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click on the Amazon link down there. There's quite a few books in my Amazon account. You can have a look, and if you'd like a signed copy, get up with me through email, and I'll be happy to work something out with you. Also, there's links to my Patreon, and you can become a member on the channel if you'd like your spooky a little bit early. Patrons and members on the $5 tier get their videos 12 hours early. That's in the morning as opposed to in the evening. Patrons at the $10 level also get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one. Speaking of my patrons, you should see them appearing right now. Just wanted to take a minute to say how much I appreciate all of you. Patrons, subscribers, however you give to the channel. I really appreciate everything you do, and it truly touches me that you have chosen to support the channel in this way. Well, that's enough for now. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.